Hello web developers, this is PJ WebDev and this is probably the most important video I'm recording for you this year, and in this video I will try to help you and give you some tips if you want to become a web developer in 2022. So what I'm gonna be talking today about is who is this video actually for and who is this plan actually for, and also what you need to know to become a web developer, what you don't need to know, who you need to be, and how to get a job and how to have a successful career. So let's start. Who is it for? So this can be useful for you if you are not a web developer yet, or you have just started learning web development. And this is also for you if you want to become web developer and make a good income, if you like programming, if you like long hours in front of computer, and you don't want to work for FAANG companies. FAANG means Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. If you want to work for those companies, this requires slightly different approach. Approach I'm going to suggest is more practical than this and more concentrated on real web development skills. So if you want to work at any of those companies, you probably need to look for a different advice somewhere else. But if you want to become a web developer in traditional company, could be agency or could be any other company, which is 99.9% of companies out there, this is absolutely this guide is for you. Or if you want to become a freelancer, this is also a good option. So your background is relevant, so it doesn't matter what you've been doing so far. If you want to learn web development from now on, this is fine. You like solving problems and you don't give up easily. You're gonna have to spend quite a significant amount of time to learn all of these skills I want to talk about, and that requires times and that requires sacrifice and that requires some hard work, so you can't really give up easily. Now what you need to know, so this is kind of the technology stack I'm suggesting you to learn to start with to get a job as a web developer. You know, this is flexible. This is what I would recommend. However, as you're going through it, you may want to adjust or learn some more or learn some less. Every job is different. Every web developer has different set of skills, and I know some people say, oh, learn this and don't learn that, but as a matter of fact, regardless of which stack you know, as long as it is currently in use, you can, as a web developer, you can get a job, and you can get a good job if you are good at what you do. So I'm recommending this one, but this is subject for you to adjust as you learn as well. And now let's have a look at some details. So first is how internet works. You need to know about servers, so where the website are hosted, domain names, how website build process looks like from design through development, testing, deployment, and things like that, and website development process as well in a little bit more detail. So depending on what deployment method you use, so like a staging environment, testing environment, and then production environment, things like that. Then it is HTML, pretty basic. As we know, everybody needs to know HTML. So HTML document structure, most common HTML tags, div, p, tags, strong, lists, images, and things like that. Then HTML attributes like ID, class, source, and for images, for example, and other common attributes, HTML attributes. And then semantic HTML like header, footer, navigation section, how the HTML document is built in terms of the structure. And you just need to know really basics of that, and you don't need to spend too much time on it. It's good to go through some kind of course and then build a couple of simple pages on your own in basic HTML. The next thing is obviously CSS, and we're talking about basic CSS here, like colors, fonts, and also I would recommend using CSS positioning, so position, absolute, relative, fixed, and things like that. Then obviously CSS flexbox and grid, which are great for layout, so you need to know very well all of this because it's very common and very helpful when building websites. And then you can also take a look at CSS animations that are also quite popular, but this is optional because animation is not something, it's not essential thing to know. You can learn it later. So the next thing is obviously JavaScript, and at this point I would just recommend learning basics, which is types and structure, variables, control flow, loops, functions, callbacks. And then there are a few very common tasks that you'll be doing pretty much all the time, which is DOM manipulation, which is finding elements in JavaScript within the HTML page and then manipulating them somehow, updating the content in them, adding new elements, things like that. There are a few very popular functions in JavaScript that find these elements and then changing them, and this is very common tasks for web developers. Then regular expressions, you need to go through again finding information on the website and then checking or finding them based on the regular expressions. And then another one is array functions, which are also very common, and these are kind of the basics of JavaScript that I would recommend learning first. Next one on the list to learn is a library or a framework, you can also call it, which is Bootstrap. Currently Bootstrap 5, and where Bootstrap is going to be most useful for you is in terms of creating layout and grids. I'm using Bootstrap constantly, and it's very helpful to create layouts that are not only look great on desktop but also on tablet and mobile device. Bootstrap has 12 column grid and also different breakpoints built in, and that's why it is very easily, or certainly easier than just writing it in pure CSS, to create responsive layout and websites. There are also a few other common elements in Bootstrap like forms, accordions, buttons, carousel models, and navigations. So as you use Bootstrap for layout, it might be also useful to take a look at other elements, but really layouts is something that is very helpful in day-to-day web development. Another one is PHP basics, and I know there are some people that advise against PHP, learning PHP, but I think it is still worth learning it. It's still probably the most popular language for creating websites, and that's why it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. There are still new improved versions of the language released. There are still frameworks and CMSs that are being developed and improved all the time, so PHP is not going anywhere. That's why I recommend you to learn PHP as a first programming language for web. You can change it later if you want. The most of the concept you will learn here you can apply to other languages like Python, but you need to start somewhere, and I think I was starting from PHP, and that's why I recommend you to do the same. So again, you need to learn some basics like types and structure, variables, flows, functions, classes, MVC concept, so model view controller concept, how it all works, how you can structure your code, and then working with databases, again regular expression, and also some security, because PHP is a backend language that works on the server. That's why, and you process some data from users. That's why security is very important to know at least some basics about security for PHP. Now we're moving on to WordPress, and again you can read online people complaining about WordPress, But I think the main issue with people complaining sometimes about WordPress is people don't use WordPress correctly. They overload them with plugins, very often unnecessary plugins, not tested plugins, and that's why WordPress is sometimes slow or clunky. But if you do this right, if you set up the system in correct way, it is actually very useful, very helpful, and you can handle many different websites on the internet using WordPress. You can customize it in the way you want it, you can optimize it in the way you want it, and you can make it secure, so it's not easy to hack, which is another thing that people sometimes complain about. But you can make it secure, and it's still the most popular CMS out there, and I think it's great for the beginner if you use it the right way. That's why WordPress should be definitely on the list for you to learn. Then another one is Laravel, which is again PHP framework. It's a little bit more advanced, gives you more flexibility, but it's not a CMS, it's just a framework. So you have the structure, like controller models, views, routes, and other helpful functionality, but most of the things you will need to build kind of from scratch, so quite different to WordPress. And then now let's take a look at databases, and the most typical databases when learning PHP is either MySQL or MariaDB. More likely these days MariaDB, and you need to learn how to use it as well, because most websites will have some kind of database behind, and that's why you need to know how to create tables or change the structure of the table, delete the table, or deleting data from the table, inserting unupdated data, primary keys, and things like that. You need to know in terms of databases, and then some kind of management for the database. Typically for MySQL or MariaDB is phpMyAdmin, but there are also other tools that enable you to manage the database in a visual way. You can also use terminal for it, and some people do it, which means we will write all the commands in as a text, but I typically use phpMyAdmin, and this is much more convenient than just typing everything by hand. Now let's look at some editors for writing code, and the most popular currently is Visual Studio Code, which is free, and it is a great tool. And it's really important to know your code editor very well, because that makes you much more efficient web developer. If you know keyboard shortcuts, if you know how to find information, find files, find projects, have extensions that will help you to write code, and in general how to effectively work with the text editor. That's why Visual is good to know. If you use Visual Studio Code, you can obviously use a different editor, but if you use Visual Studio Code, I think it is essential to get to know the editor well, install all the necessary plugins that will make your life significantly easier. Another important element if you want to become web developer is Git and GitHub, which are repositories where the code is stored. Git is the version control system, and GitHub is like a storage where the code is stored. It could be other system as well, GitLab for example. There are quite a few others, and currently most companies use some kind of version of Git and GitHub to collaborate on the code, to make the modification, to commit, push and pull code, so many developers can work on the same project, so many developers can work on the same code without creating any conflicts, overwriting each other codes and things like that. And then from this code can be deployed also directly to a server and be published either to staging or testing or live environment. And then as a modern web developer, I recommend learning a few more things, because web development is always changing, and one of the things that is quite common and becoming more common and more popular these days is no code. No code is nothing new, but in the recent years these kind of tools have become very popular, and one of the most popular tool, if not the most popular no-code tool, is Webflow. And Webflow enables you to create websites without writing a single line of code. You can do everything in Visual Editor. Another important area is automation, and there are also different tools out there like Zapier or Integromat that can be helpful for marketing automation and automating some routine tasks like signing up for newsletter on your website. So sometimes instead of writing code from scratch, it's good to use this kind of tools to make your life a little bit easier. Also, as a web developer, you probably need to know some basics of marketing, analytics, user experience. You're just not writing code, but you have like a broader idea why websites are created, what's the business value of them, and how they can be friendly and useful for the users to use. I've also added Figma and Adobe XD, which are popular tools for designers to design websites. So sometimes you may be given the design in Figma or Adobe XD from web designer, and you will need to transfer it to a code from that format. That's why it's good to know these kind of software, so you know how to do it the right way. And then I put also responsive design. This should probably be on like an essential list, because you need to be able these days to create not only desktop but also tablet and mobile devices. Make sure that the website looks good regardless of the resolution of the device it is being viewed. So I put it on the other useful knowledge, but really it should be an essential thing for every web developer to know. Now let's take a look what you don't need to know, I think, when you're getting started. And it is DevOps, and that means all the server infrastructure and details about deployment of the code from the GitHub repository, for example. It's useful to know this, and you should certainly know some basics, but in terms of setting it all up, more and more common companies have dedicated DevOps people to do it. This is not really a job for web developer unless you are a freelancer. If you work on a team in a company, then there should be somebody else taking care of that. And also, as a web developer, you don't need to know every single technology and every single programming language out there. I've been doing web development for 20 years. Still, I have a lot of things to learn, and it's impossible to know every single language and every single framework. So we need to just pick something, and I've just recommended you what, in my opinion, you should learn to start with. But obviously, this is not like a list that is closed. If you know JavaScript, for example, you can then learn Node.js, and then you can start developing websites instead of PHP, then in some kind of JavaScript backend framework. So this is quite flexible, and throughout your career it's quite likely that you will be changing frameworks and you will be learning new languages anyway. So this is the reality of this profession. Now let's have a look who you need to be. And now we're looking into sort of some kind of soft skills that are very often overlooked, but are very important in my opinion, and they are at least 50% of all of the skills for a web developer as a whole. So not only technical skills you need to know, but this kind of soft skills are also very important, especially that technology changes very frequently. We have constantly new frameworks, new languages, improved languages, a new way of doing things, and soft skills like complement the technical skills you have. So you need to be confident. You may not know everything, but you need to be confident about what you already know and who you are. You need to have good communication skills, so you need to be able to express your thinking, your ideas. You need to be able to communicate with people on your team or some kind of external or internal stakeholders of the project. So you need to keep them up to date where the project is, if you have any questions, things like that. So you need to be good communicator to be successful in web development. Then you need to solve problems. There are many problems you will come across, and I'm talking about technical problems like bugs, but also like somebody comes to you with a business problem and then you need to find the right technology to solve it for them. They need to be curious, because I always wonder how things work and whether it's possible to do what I've been doing in the past in a better way, and finding new technology or new piece of code or new tool that will help me to do things better every day. And they need to be innovator and idea generator, so provide new ideas to the team. People love new ideas, so that's if you innovator and you generate new ideas, that will really help you in day-to-day work as a web developer. And you obviously need to learn all the time, because things change. You just need to constantly learn to stay up to date within the industry. And now let's take a look at how to get a job. And there are a few sort of tips I can give you at this point, and one of them is just apply for jobs that roughly fits your current skills and interest. You don't have to know every single technology posted on the job description, but you need to probably have 50-60% of skills, at least to some level. And you need to want to work for the specific company as well. So don't apply for the companies that you don't like just to get any job, because you will have less chance to get the job, because quite likely you will not be as motivated as you would if that was the company you really want to work for. And then another thing is definitely tell the truth. So don't say that you know something that you don't know, or you worked on a project that you have never worked, because if you are exposed, that's going to significantly reduce your chances to get a job, rather than saying, just basically being honest and saying, I don't know this, or I've never worked on this in this technology or on that project, but I'm happy to learn and I'm happy to improve my skills in the future if that's what can get me the job here. So always tell the truth and never lie about what you know or what you've done. Have a good CV. So a good CV is talking about your past, so what you've done in the before, what you're currently doing, and what you know, and what you're planning to learn in the future, because you may not match exactly currently for the job position, but if you say you're learning programming language or framework that is required for the job, this can work as your advantage during the recruitment process. And then another thing is just value yourself. You are for the company as much as they are for them. You give them then time and skills, and then pay you for that time and for that skill. And this needs to be a balance here, because if you're desperate to get a job, then one, you're less likely to get that job if they see you desperate and you don't value yourself, and two, it's just not good for you for your future development. So make sure you value yourself, you apply for the jobs that match your skills, and then you will have higher chances to not only get that job but do well in that job. And then let's have a look at successful career once you have a job. Let's say you've been successful in the recruitment process, then you need to know your company, you need to know your role, you need to be valuable for the company, so you need to provide a lot of value. And that's why it's good to know what the company goals are and what is your role, what you should be doing to provide the most value. You need to get on with people well, but at the same time, so you need to be nice, but at the same time, you also need to be assertive, which means you need to sometimes say no, or you need to sometimes say opinion that is different than other people, but that's fine to do. Most companies would really appreciate different point of view. So as long as you express it in a nice way, I'm sure everybody will be happy. And then be flexible. You've been employed as a web developer, but there may be jobs that you will have to be doing that are not necessarily in your job description, but that's fine as long as this is not constant, just every once in a while. and most of the things that you're going to be doing is actually a job as a web developer you've been employed to do, and you need to learn constantly learn about the company, constantly learn web development, constantly learn to become better at what you do. So that is really it. If what I've just told you seems to fit what you want to learn in 2022, or even start now, then I'll be teaching all of this and even more in more detail in 2022. In fact, I've started already, and I have some videos about web development, no-code and automation on my YouTube channel. So if that interests you, let me know in the comments if you have any more questions, and subscribe to the channel and learn with me. I hope this was useful. Thank you very much for watching, and see you again soon.